Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Independent View with your host Lobo Tigre of IndependentSpeculator.com. Our guest of the day is Rafi Farber. He's publisher of the Endgame Investor. Now, Rafi's a hard money advocate. He's got a lot of things that he and I obviously think similarly on. It was actually a mutual client, I think, of ours that suggested this interview, said I should talk to Rafi. Interesting guy. But Endgame Investor, I have questions about this thesis. So Rafi, why don't you give us an overview of what you do, and then let's get into it.
Well, Lobo, I guess what I do is I try to simplify the concept of what money is and give that to my subscribers and sort of give like an A to Z of what money is, why it's in the economy, and when it really clicks in and you get it, then you can stop calling gold and silver like inflation hedges or safe havens or things like that. Because when somebody says to you gold is money, it seems like such a basic statement, but it is what it's the idea that I try to get my people on board with, that basically the end game is when we return to gold as money instead of all the other derivatives of gold. Because when you think about what a dollar is, right, there's a chain here. A dollar, the paper dollar, like a dollar bill, the first paper money, is really a derivative of gold, or you could say silver from 1873. And we can have an argument about whether gold was originally a silver substitute or a gold substitute, but that's how it started. That's how paper money started. And then from there you have a derivative of paper money, which is bonds, and from there you have a derivative of bonds, which is trading bonds or futures of bonds. And the derivatives keep going up and up the chain until we ask ourselves, like, generations later, what is money? What is all this paper? What is all this stuff shuffling around? What is Bitcoin? I mean, you could say, that's a further derivative of the chain, because when it was born, it derived itself from the dollar, because it's traded for dollars or traded for stuff. But you have all these derivatives of derivatives of derivatives, and they keep going, and nobody knows the financial system is so convoluted now that nobody knows what the hell anything is anymore. So when you simplify everything down and you say that, yeah, gold is money, and this entire pyramid of all the derivatives off of gold or silver, let's say, it's all going to topple over, and the only thing that will be left is gold or silver. And you could say empirically, that's a logical argument, but empirically, every time there's a currency collapse in any country, the gold and silver always go in the opposite direction. The currency goes to zero, and gold and silver go to infinity in those currency terms. So that basically means the derivatives are being rejected and real money is being returned to. And there's no reason to believe that anything will be different this time, despite the fact that we have all these digital derivatives.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say that, but let me jump in. But Rafi, it's the 21st century. Don't you know there's gold 2.0, and it's even more limited in supply. So why would the world return to gold? I'm playing devil's advocate, but what's your stock answer? I know you must have an answer for this. Is there a short version for what you tell people when they try to sell you on gold 2.0?
Yeah, I mean, they're not the first ones to think that it was gold 2.0, but just from a logical perspective, right? If you go back to the Mises and Ludwig von Mises, not the founder of the Austrian school, but really who united we could call it macroeconomics. It's not macroeconomics. He united all of economics into Austrian business cycle theory. He said money it's a logical issue, right? When you're exchanging one thing for another thing, and there's a price of one in terms of the other, what you're taking that price and you're connecting it to the past. Like, the only reason you know what prices are today is because you knew what they were yesterday, and so on and so forth into the past. In a long chain that goes back originally to gold and silver coins that you had in your pocket. This is an unbroken chain, right? There's been some bumps in the road where there's been devaluations, like when gold was devalued from $21 to $35. That was a huge bump in the road, which created a huge depression, but it didn't create like an apocalypse, right? People still were able to trade food for money. So it was a big bump in the road, but you have to go back to that original monetary nexus point, I call it, So whether you like it or not, when Bitcoin was born, it was indexed to the dollar. When the dollar was born, it was indexed to gold because that's how, or silver, because that's how transactions began in this modern global economy, right? So when you're trading dollar for things, you're trading the gold value of the dollar for things. When you're trading Bitcoin for things, you're trading the dollar value of Bitcoin because it's a chain that logically goes back into the past. So when the dollar falls, when the middle of that chain falls, you have gold, dollar, Bitcoin. When Bitcoin falls, there's no connection between Bitcoin and gold, so Bitcoin just goes to nothing in real terms. Even though it could be $1 trillion, who cares?
That is an interesting argument. I hadn't thought of that. All right, well, but I really don't want to get too focused on the crypto side, but it's good to get your take on that. I want to rewind to sort of the beginning of the conversation and the endgame thesis. And your endgame thesis is that ultimately it comes back to real money. And by the way, I try hard routinely to get my readers to wean themselves from talking and thinking about futures contracts prices as the price of gold or silver, or even thinking of the price of gold and silver at all. I think of it in terms of the gold dollar exchange ratio and where that's going. So we're very much, I think, in tune here. But this endgame thesis, it's been a century going in the other direction plus. And as an investor, okay, I mean, philosophically, I'm on board with you. You didn't say anything I disagree with. As an investor, time horizons matter to me. And my purpose isn't just to protect myself against the financial apocalypse. My purpose is to make money while there's money to be made before then. So, even if we agree completely on the endgame thesis, how does that help me now? How does that help me make money this year, unless the endgame is upon us?
Okay, so my answer to that is that there's no one system that I have found that is right even most of the time in terms of trading. You're talking the basic question you're asking is trading versus investing for the end game. Should there be trading? And my answer is yeah, there probably should be. Because there's a chance that I'm wrong, that the end game doesn't come for another 10, 15 years. But if that's true, my approach is still to buy the dips and sell the rallies with a portion of what I have, what I think really distinguishes a responsible investor or trader from a bad one is not that he has a good year or 2 good years or even 5 good years or whatever, and he makes 100%, whatever crazy numbers you want to put together. He's a genius options trader. I don't know. But what really distinguishes them is, I guess, hubris versus humility. If you are able to accept the fact that you're human and you don't really know everything, even if you might be pretty sure in your own head, right, then you can trade and invest with humility and never take too much risk and never do anything that can wipe you out. So yeah, I do trade and buy dips and sell rallies, and it's hard for me. It's hard for anyone to go against what they think. Right, when I have to sell a gold stock because I'm up a certain percentage and I really don't want to, and or I have to buy in the dip and it's terrifying, and I still get those emotions. But there's still a core that I keep, that I hold on to, assuming that the end game is going to come tomorrow or a week from now. I can reverse that question onto you and say, like, if you're busy trading, like, there's a lot of systems that I've seen of real gold bugs who are on the right side of things, that they take 100%, like it's 100% of what they have and put it all into gold for a week and then take it all out, and then they short gold in short term, and then they go back to neutral, and then they just I can't handle that, because one day it's gonna come. One day it is going to come. Okay, and you don't want to be caught, short or not positioned when it does, because when it does, it's going to be freaking brutal for everybody. Even the people on our side, we don't know what is coming, because nobody has lived through a global thing of this proportion before. And to say that we're prepared, even mentally, we're not. We'll be more prepared than other people, but really, at bottom, I have no idea what really is coming. All I can do is pray that I'm on the right side of history, and leave the rest up to God, because what else can I do?
Okay, let me jump in and answer your pushback before we go further down the track here. And just say I'm not a day trader. I'm absolutely not an advocate of any kind of system, that's guaranteed to, make you money. Just follow me, right? But while the markets are going in a direction, like while I'm bullish on metals, mining stocks, and so on, then there's money to be made. So, I don't. Interesting. You said, "Well, I've hit my target, so it's hard for me to sell." I actually don't have that kind of target. I have a thesis. This company is building its first mine, or they're exploring for this, or they're about, they have their first mine and they're building this. There's some thesis, and when that is achieved, then I have to evaluate whether I want to continue. Is there a new speculation here, or am I done? So I'm not a short-term trader at all. I'm very much a buy and hold, but not a buy and hold forever in terms of the wealth generating part of my portfolio. It's until whatever investment, basis for speculation is accomplished. Completely different from bullion, right? I don't right? I don't see that as an investment or a speculation at all. That's savings. I don't gamble with that. I don't play with that. I don't dance in and out of that. That is there so I can feed my family if necessary when everything else falls apart. And I've actually had this happen to me, Rafi. I haven't experienced the end of the world, but I have experienced a personal financial, just total disaster where I was in between jobs on my way to the new job and suddenly it disappeared and just really difficult situation. I won't get into all the details, but I had basically nothing. I spent everything in this disaster, and all I had left was bullion. And the short version of the story is I had a large number of Mexican silver pesos from the 50s and 60s that were not actual silver. They had a little bit of silver in them. And this was in 1999. So after all these decades of zeros being lopped off the Mexican peso, I don't know how many times, 5, 6 times, I took those old coins with a smidgen of real money in them to a pawn shop, and they gave me 1 peso for each one of them. So imagine if I had been holding, bank account notional money or paper money even, I would have had nothing. But I had these old silver, little bit of silver in there. So this is very real for me. I'm a big believer in physical gold and silver, my direct possession, the long for which there is no short, in case something really bad happens. But it's funny that you mentioned that, like psychologically we're not prepared. I have to say that this isn't something that I've discussed a lot with my readers. I focus on the investment question in front of us, not so much personal preparation and mental preparedness. I'm not sure there's really anything we can do. Like you say, nobody's been through the end of the world before. What do you do to try to help people out?
What do I do? Like a lot of the endgame investors is about emotional balance. There's nothing I can do directly to help the people who read my stuff, except just be myself and be emotionally supportive. I mean, like, look, just go, forgetting all the financial stuff, right? When I first discovered, when it first hit me that this was coming, this was happening, and that was when I discovered Ron Paul around 2012 or 2011, 2012. I was like, I found Ron Paul, and all of a sudden, it just like every single question that I had as a kid on economics that made no sense, and then I just tucked away and said, I don't know what the hell that means, but I just, the old adults say a bunch of things, and there's like just 2 of them, like 2 stories I tell are I saw a 1,000 shekel bill in my father's drawer, an old shekel from 1980. There was hyperinflation in Israel in 1983, and he had a 1,000 shekel bill with Maimonides on it. And I thought it was a lot of money, so I asked him, like, how much is this worth? He's like, oh, it's worth nothing. The currency died. It was like, so, how does inflation grow an economy? So he said, oh, inflation is the way you grow an economy, but like you have a dead bill in there. It didn't make any sense. And the other memory I had was as a high school senior, and going into macroeconomics, and they're saying, well, the dollar basically has value now because the government says it does. I'm like, what the hell does that mean? And it really disturbed me, but I just tucked it away. But all these questions got answered in 2012. But but even back then, I was thinking, oh, the end of the world's going to hit and gold and silver are going to go to infinity. I'm going to be rich and I'll help all my friends and everything will be hunky dory and, rainbows and unicorns and whatever. And then 2020 hit, March 2020 hit, and the government's brought down the hammer on all of our lives like hell. And I have 5 kids who cannot go to school because I refuse to put things on their faces or give them certain things. And like my family is okay, but this was the hell that I had no idea was coming. Even though I knew the end of the world was coming, I didn't know it was going to look this stupid. but it did. Was I prepared for it? No. But did I get prepared for it mentally? Did I get through it? Yeah, I got through it. I'm not happy about it, but this is something that I had to go through personally, and we're all gonna have to go through the crap that is gonna be thrown at us, and I guarantee you it's not over yet. So yeah, there's a lot to prepare for, and you just got to take it as it comes, and it's gonna be scary, but yeah, keep your gold and silver because and arm yourself if you can. It's gonna be quite a bit.
Interesting. Okay, so I mean, this begs the question. We skirted around this at the beginning. Let's go back to then. When do you think the end game comes? Do you have a base case expectation? Putting you on the spot here.
I can take this in a number of different directions, in a totally secular direction or in a quasi-religious direction. Let's try both. Like my secular answer is there's so many triggers that could happen. Do I have to pick the right trigger? Let's just pick one. So I think there's one thing I'm imagining is possible is that there's an inflation report and or a CPI or a PCE or whatever acronym you want to put, and it's way out of expectations, and the Fed decides to hike rates, let's say 50 basis points, 75 basis points like they did in 1994, and the bond market like really tanks on that because it's more than they were expecting, and then the next inflation report after that comes out even faster than before. Basically, what I'm talking about is a scenario from 1978 to 1980 where inflation keeps going higher, price inflation, what they call inflation. I just call it rising prices. It just keeps going higher and higher and higher, and the Fed keeps hiking, right? Basically, the end game almost happened. It almost happened in 1980. It was that close, and then the CME shut down silver trading, and they said you can only sell, you can't buy. Basically, they'll try that again. Right, from 1979 to 1980, they'll try that again, but except this time they'll say, okay, fine, if we can't buy futures, we're going to go attack the physical market and we're going to buy all the coins. It's going to spill over this time into the physical markets, and that's when you're not going to be able to buy any gold and silver anywhere. So that's going to happen. Exactly when, if we're going to dip slightly into the religious angle here, and I don't really talk about this on my subscriber service or anything, but it's part of my personality, and I try to keep it separate. But it does occur to me, that we're in the 50th year since the end of the gold standard. People think it's 1971. It was really 1973 because that was the final attempt by the Nixon administration to re-peg gold to the dollar to gold at 42.22, which is, if you look at the Fed's balance sheet. At the H4 report, Google H4 Fed balance sheet, you'll see that their gold certificate account is like 11 million something dollars. And if you divide that by the amount of ounces in Fort Knox, you'll come out with gold at $42.22 an ounce. That's where they're still pegged on the balance sheet because they're still pretending gold is worth $42.22. So it's been 50 years since then, right? And 50 years before 1973 was what? 1923. 1923 was the first industrial hyperinflation in Germany, which kicked off the whole chain of events that led to World War II. Before that, 50 years before that was 1873. That was the end of the silver standard. That was the crime of 1873. That was, when they demonetized silver and brought it all to gold, which was basically the same thing that they're doing now, which is smashing the middle class, which owns silver, in favor of the rich, which own gold, and giving the rich all the power and taking all the purchasing power away from the poor people. That was 50 years before that. So we have these 50-year cycles, which also match up with the Jewish calendar year of the sabbatical, which is this year, and next year's, probably the Jubilee, and we don't know. It could be, maybe it's not. If it's not, I'm not going to go all in. I'm not going to go crazy and buying all these options on gold and silver and betting that, my religious calculations are correct or anything. It's just something that goes in my head. I think it's going to be this year, next year. Could I be wrong? Sure.
Okay, so my good friend Doug Casey has been calling for the Greater Depression for the greater part of 40 years, I think. And he says it's happening now, right? It started already. I love Doug. I'm not trying to throw him under the bus here, but it's just a fact. You could Google that too. He's been calling for the Greater Depression for decades and decades. And, maybe he's right. What do you do if, the end game isn't next year or the year after that? How long before you change the name of your service or at some point, do you think differently or just double down? How do you deal with that?
Well, I'm not taking any bets that are, tied to timing, except, there's some small options bets I make that if I lose them, I lose them, just a few fractions of a percent here and there, because if I'm right. If I'm wrong, I keep putting a percentage away into bullion, putting a percentage away into gold and silver stocks, and those will grow through dividends or capital growth, or stay relatively stable. I don't think they're going to fall that much from here because they're already performing pretty poorly. But I'm going to keep going because I guess theoretically, is there something that could happen? Yeah. Joe Biden could say, we're going to cut the budget by 50%, and and we're going to fire 6 whole departments. He could turn into Ron Paul tomorrow, sure, but then I would say, I guess the dollar's going to survive. But I can't see a scenario that takes us out of this other than complete collapse. And judging by what has happened since 2020 and what is happening now geopolitically, it seems, and just generally the fact that we are living in idiocracy, sadly, and there's really nothing I can do about it. I can't see. I see the state of human society, and it just doesn't seem like it wants to survive.
It's interesting that you frame it that way. Everything I'm hearing from you is really part of a bigger picture, and it's part of a trend. It's not, the war in Eastern Europe is suddenly the critical moment. Clearly that has to factor into your decision making on a near-term basis. But you've almost, you just barely mentioned it now. So can you talk about that a little bit? Does it change your outlook in any way?
You mean what's happening in Russia and Ukraine? Does it change my outlook?
Well, yeah, Russia and Ukraine is the seed, but it's the economic warfare, really, that's more directly relevant, I think, to our subject.
Yeah. Well, does it change my outlook? No, I don't think it changes my outlook more than it changes my pre-look. And what I mean by that is that I didn't know that the dollar was this resilient, or at least the global system as we have it now is this resilient that it can keep surviving after all these attacks. That it could survive like lockdowns of the entire world and continue even $4 trillion. And I didn't know reverse repos could reach $2 trillion and all this crazy stuff that just keeps adding zeros to it. So it changes how resilient that I saw the dollar as being. I saw it as being less resilient than it is now. But now that it seems that it seems obvious that someone is trying to kill the system, if not consciously. That's just either out of idiocy or out of conspiracy. I don't know. I don't really take a position on who's planning this, and I don't really care. I'm not. Other people can take positions on that, and whatever is. I can't stop it or control it. But Russia provides pretty much all the natural gas to many Eastern European countries, and the EU is like, if Greece falls or can't pay its debt, the entire thing just crumbles. I mean, there's everything is like a tinderbox, and a tiny match could set anything off. We saw it happen in 2010 with the sovereign debt crisis. We saw all these crises come up, and something is going to set it off. It's still all there. Everything is still all there, and nothing has been solved since 2008. It's only gotten worse. The question is, what is the trigger? And we just have to be humble enough to say we don't know exactly. But it's definitely coming, because everything just keeps getting worse, and there's no improvement in any of this. I mean, I don't see it lasting more than a few months, and maybe it will, and if it does, I'll keep going.
That is an interesting way to frame it. It strikes me, though, and I'm not disagreeing with what you've said, but I just got to tell you, Rafi, I remember in 2009, early 2009, after we were through the worst from 2008, but not yet into the next bubble, the next reflationary boom. And at that time, I just couldn't see how they could pull it off. It seemed like the body blows the global economy had taken, the fragility of the dollar, all of it. I just couldn't see how this global house of cards could withstand such a shock. And yet somehow the powers that be managed to kick the can down the road. It just seemed like an earthquake didn't knock the house of cards down. It was more anti-fragile than I thought, to use the word of the day. So it always makes me worried. I want to be prepared for the end game. But I have a lot of readers, and really the reason why we're having this conversation isn't just that some reader of mine suggested it, but because a lot of readers are writing to me and asking about a potential market crash this year, or what to do, if the petrodollar system breaks down and things go critical. There's stuff happening right now which is seriously alarming. And so it makes sense to me to start thinking about preparing for the end game. But at the same time, I just remember being so sure in early 2009 that there was no way they could pull this off, and somehow they did. So do you have a plan B? Or I hear you saying, well, I'm not taking huge risks and betting the farm that it's all going to end tomorrow. But is there a investment plan B for how to deal with things if the end game is not for some years?
If it's not for some years, yeah. I mean, I earn dividends on my stocks. I get a nice income from the investments that I've made. It's not like we're suffering that much. What you have to suffer through is mostly envy, because you're seeing all these other people making money in, like, the ARK ETF and all this other garbage. Okay, so fine. So you can if you want to, like, have an outlet for that. I don't have to tell you which stocks to buy to participate in a crazy bubble. Like, they're obvious. Buy Tesla, buy Bitcoin, whatever, But if you need like an emotional outlet for not having envy or not having FOMO, for other people who invest in all these bubblicious trends, then do it. It's probably a good idea, so that you don't feel tempted to, like, abandon the entire thing and then just go in all in tech stocks or something. So have a small portion of your portfolio dedicated to the stocks that are going crazy, and whatever happens to it, happens to it. Just be religious about not chasing anything, and just have it be an outlet. So that is one piece of advice I do share for people who need to do that, and that's okay. But for me, part of my message, right, and is what kind of person do you want to be, assuming this happens? And not just that you missed out, or that you weren't able to protect your family with real money, or whatever it is, but when you lived through this era, right? And if we're going to take the whole medical angle, did you do this to your children? Did you force them to put stuff on their faces? Did you stand up to your neighbors when they said that you were trying to kill them? Whatever it was, did you automatically think that one country was good and the other country was bad in this whole geopolitical thing that they're setting up now? Where were you when all this injustice happened? What kind of person do you want to be remembered as when you're older? So, do you want to be the kind of the person that participates in this basically fundamentally immoral and disgusting system that enriches the rich on the backs of the poor? And I know these are general statements, but when you really go into this, you see how it works, and it's really disgusting. and I can't be that kind of person. So this is really it's a moral religious issue for me. That for the same reason that the same reason it's there's two sides of using the coin analogy. There's two sides of the same coin here. There's one side of the coin is, as a religious person, I cannot bow down to a physical object and say that it is God, whether that is a man or a statue or the sun or whatever, okay? Because God is not physical. That's one of my moral principles. For the same reason, I cannot bow down to a digital thing and say that it is money, because money has to be physical for the same reason God has to be not physical. That's a philosophical religious principle for me. Because once you start worshiping physical things, you're really worshiping yourself. And once you think money is spiritual, you think that you can create a God. It's sort of the same thing. It's the same sin, and I don't want to be part of it.
All right. Well, we've covered a lot more philosophical ground than I normally do in one of these, but I like the humility that you bring to this. I like the it's a Hayekian knowledge issue, right? You don't know everything, I don't know everything, and it's good to admit that and make sure that you don't pretend otherwise. And you've given some pretty practical guidance. Is there a top 5 list of preparing for the end game that you have that you give your readers or are willing to share? Or, I mean, it's one thing to say philosophically, try to prepare. It's a big deal. Psychology is important, but in terms of practical steps, what do you tell a new person who comes along and is interested or is concerned about the end game, and what do I do?
Yeah. I don't know if it's top 5, but there is a checklist. How many there are? Well, the first thing you should do is get physical silver coins and keep them somewhere hidden in your immediate physical access, somewhere in your house or buried in your back. I don't know, wherever. A trusted friend, because that's going to be the immediate money when we wake up one day and the dollar is down 10% and bonds are selling off like crazy and interest rates rocket to 20%. Nobody knows what the hell's going on. Currency is not going to buy you food. You're going to need silver coins. The second thing I would say is have something to defend yourself. You don't have to go crazy and start hoarding guns and ammunition or anything like that. I don't go too extreme in any one direction because I really don't know exactly what's going to happen. But you'll probably want to be armed because there are going to be people that are hungry, and you don't want to be bothered by them in the worst of times. The third thing is you should have some gold, which is less important than silver, I think. You should have some gold stored away from you. I wouldn't store too much of it in my house, but in some private vault somewhere. Maybe you can have a few coins in your house, but more than that is too dangerous. Get your investments in order. If you have a stock portfolio, I would say get physical copies of your stocks. So if the internet goes down or something like that, you don't have to be calling Ameritrade or Interactive Brokers and not getting answers on the phone. Like you'll want some physical representation of your portfolio, and even more important than that is have some skills that you can rely on. If you're a carpenter, great. If you can build stuff, great. And be around like-minded people. That's one thing that I've learned that is very important for your mental health, especially in these past 2 years. Be around people who basically agree with what you're saying, because otherwise you could be driven mad.
Or even if not driven mad, even if not driven mad, or if your neighbors think the way you do, your security concerns are completely different than if you live in some skyscraper in New York City where nobody thinks the way you do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one of the initiatives that I'm involved in now in Israel is getting people together who basically are moral people in the monetary sense, and that they understand what theft is. And inflation is basically theft. That's what it is. And this entire society that's been building since 1973 is a society based on theft, and a society based on theft will eventually eat itself alive. which is what we're seeing. So you want to be around people who are honest, have a community of like-minded people who are basically preparing for the same thing, not necessarily even in the same ways, but people who you can rely on, family, friends, whatever, for your mental and physical security.
Okay. Well, that certainly gives us food for thought. You've been pretty generous with your time, and you've been pretty good sport about some of the pushback I've thrown your way. I'll give you the last word. Anything else you want to make sure our audience thinks about?
What you think financially? Don't take yourselves too seriously. I even try not to take myself too seriously. I think that's the key to staying relaxed in these times, and also keep in mind just basic logic. Remember where money comes from. Don't be tempted by all these new derivatives of money. If you need to speculate in some of them with a tiny fraction of your portfolio, do it if you need to. But always come back and ask yourself the question: then is this really possible? And if it doesn't make basic logical sense, then throw it out. Trust your mind that God gave you, and Godspeed.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Rafi. To the audience, there is no endgameinvestor.com, but Rafi is available on the internet. If you search for the Endgame Investor, you will find him. Thank you very much, Rafi, and all the best. I hope we're around to compare notes in a couple of years, and things haven't gotten too crazy on us. Like, I hope you're wrong, but I'll be prepared if you're right.
No. I guess that is one last word that I can share.
Okay,
that's
go
positive,
ahead.
right? Everyone looks at hyperinflation and sees it as, oh no, hyperinflation, we're all going to die and it's horrible. No, Murray Rothbard saw hyperinflation as the last resort of the public to bring back control of the economic system into their hands, right? We talk about the Great Reset and all these horrible things that are going to happen, and perpetual totalitarianism that can never die. But once they lose control of the monetary system, they lose control of everything, because if they can't pay their thugs to enforce their crazy laws, they can't control anything. Like their power is really very diluted, and it's all an illusion. So once hyperinflation hits, once they lose control of the monetary system, we're free. Yeah, it's dangerous because we have to reorganize everything. But I sincerely hope that all the central banks have no gold and no silver. I know they'll have no silver, but I hope that they have no gold, so that all the libertarians in the world and all those who really care about human freedom and human quality of life and human progress, they have the real money and they will have the power in the future. Do not fear hyperinflation. It is our best friend. Let it come as soon as possible so we can all be free of this injustice.
Wow. Okay. I didn't see that coming. So thanks for jumping in with that final thought. I'm happy to end on an upbeat note. We can't start another hour-long conversation. I'm not sure I'm as optimistic. No, let me not pull my words. I am not as optimistic as you are. I can see somebody pushing the button if they think they're losing power and just. So let me rephrase. I hope you're right, and we live in a freer world within a few years. I'll buy you a beer somewhere if that happens. Thanks again, Rafi. You have a good one.
Good. You too.
Thank you for watching this edition of In the Pit with Lobo Tigre. If you enjoyed or found value in what you just saw, and you're watching this on any sort of social media, please do hit the like button and the share link. Send this on to anybody you think might be interested. That helps us out a lot. If you're watching this on YouTube, please do hit the subscribe button as well. The number of subscribers helps us get more valuable content to you as well. On the subject of subscribing, I'll quickly say that if you're not a subscriber to our free weekly Speculators Digest, I encourage you to sign up. I promise if you do, we will not send you a flood of daily advertisements. You get one free weekly digest with original research not published anywhere else. Check it out at independentspeculator.com. Thank you and have a great day.